I hope I'm speaking loudly enough for everybody to hear me. Just tell me if I'm fading. I always enjoy coming out and talking about antiques. Antiques are my very favorite things in the world. And thank you so much for inviting me and for bringing these great items. I think that as far as my story in antiques is concerned, it dates back to a fascination with an old trunk that used to be up in our attic. And this old trunk held everything that our family brought from Germany when we came over as displaced persons after the Second World War. Everything our family had or had managed to accumulate, which wasn't much, was in that trunk. And I remember going up into the attic with my mom, and we would always beg her, my sister and I, we'd beg her, can we open the trunk? Can we open the trunk? And okay, she wouldn't say okay very often, but she would say okay once in a while. And so then we would go through and look at all of these things. And I remember specifically that there was this aroma of, it's kind of a musty aroma. The books were just kind of old and everything was interesting to look at. And so my sister and I would have our fill of doing that, and then it would go back up into the attic for a number of years or a number of months until we could convince her to bring it back down for us. Now you can understand a little bit, we were Estonians and we were displaced into Germany during the turmoil of the Second World War. And that's where I was born, in a DP camp in Aschaffenburg. And so my father would write in this book very, very in Estonian, so nobody can pick this up and understand it except me. I still speak and I can understand Estonian completely. But he wrote this book about me. Now this, in my world, it really does, it's the very essence of an heirloom for me. It is something that it was made by hand by my dad, and it was chronicling my early years with some pictures, but mostly handwriting because we didn't have cameras. We were lucky enough to end up on a farm in Griggs County, and that's where we lived, on the farmer who was kind enough to sponsor my family. So my road to becoming an antique dealer took many turns in the meantime, but really there were a lot of similarities between how we started out in this state and how other settlers who had come from other places, Norway, Sweden, other immigrants who had come in a different era. And the original settlers had there's a lot of commonality there. They were poor usually, they weren't rich people. They came into this area hoping usually for land. And once they got land, it was just a matter of figuring out how to make a living on that land. And they had ambition, they had grit, they were willing to work hard, and they did. And amazingly, usually, in most cases, it worked out just fine. Now, these settlers who came, they didn't come over from Europe with crates full of bone china from England. They didn't. They had some fairly simple tools that they brought with them. And some of these were, most of them, all of them really, were utilitarian items. And so you had a lot of, in those early days of our states settling, you had a lot of people coming in and having things like bowls and churns, and they made quilts for the beds, and there'd be possibly a Bible, tools, of course, things that were useful but were not necessarily decorative. And so a lot of these things have fallen by the wayside. They were either they got used up, they were broken, and they ended up getting thrown. But a few others were saved. And so today I'm glad to see that we have several examples of things like that that would have come into our state early on and were the kinds of things that people, they needed to have in order to make a living. Now, this probably the one example that sticks out is the spinning wheel. Whose is this? Yeah, okay. Could you tell us just briefly whose it is? And
grandfather and grandmother from Dallin immigrated from Norway, Engadal, and they brought a number of things with them, like you were saying, including this spinning wheel, and it has my grandmother's name on it. Her name was Barrett Lovely, L-O-V-L-I, and it has 1900 on it, so it's pretty old. The wool that you see on this spool was spun by my grandmother. So it hasn't lost, any of the patina has been lost.
this is really wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful piece. You don't, very typically, these days, those types of things that came over with original settlers, they're few and far between. And a lot of them have been discarded over the years. And so it's kind of hard, it's kind of rare to see a nice old one like this. I was really glad that you brought it in. Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome.
The thing about life in North Dakota during those times is that success did come for people, and before too long they were able to afford other things that they incorporated into their world. And a lot of those were things like, people would buy watches, jewelry, dishes, furniture, and those things were suddenly something that, gee, we can afford this kind of thing. So we're talking teens, 20s time period. And during that time, furniture, for example, was ordered, a lot of it, through mail order catalogs like Sears and others, that they'd ship the furniture up to you in North Dakota, usually from Chicago. And I don't know if you've ever looked at an old mail order catalog from one of the major catalog suppliers, but they always had different grades of merchandise. So let's say the settler that settled on his land claim decided they needed a new dresser or a dresser. They'd stop using their trunk and they'd actually buy a dresser. There were 3 levels of quality. There was the highest quality, the mid quality, and the lowest quality. And of course, the price was accordingly, high, medium, low. And guess which grade a lot of the people selected for their furniture? They went with the lowest quality because it was the same thing, it looked the same way, it's just that it cost a lot less money. And so people here, when they bought their old furniture or their furniture for their houses, they bought the cheapest kind of furniture they could get. And then they would ship it up from Chicago, and it would come on the train, and the train station would unload it, and that's how we got a lot of our furniture during those years. Now, what does that mean for us in terms of looking at antiques from this area? It means that we weren't getting furniture made in Boston. We weren't getting furniture made in England. And the furniture that we saw in our homes and that ended up getting sold to us through secondary means were, generally speaking, pretty simple, pretty, bottom of the line kinds of things. And that includes everything from the furniture to the dishes. We didn't have a lot of English bone china being purchased in North Dakota by our settlers. We had people, they got what was the cheapest. And so as a result, a lot of what we see in the way of antiques is kind of that way. Now we missed this little item here. I got to talk about them. Whose was this? Yeah, okay. And your name?
Clarence.
Clarence, okay. Now this is one of those things that the wood item that got used heavily, and you can see the wear on this. I mean, this got used and used. It has a little nail here. You could hang it up on the wall.
I put that on.
Oh, did you? Okay.
No,
Well,
I use it for decoration. I don't make butter anymore.
there is a hole. There is a hole there,
Yeah.
and it probably originally had something like that.
Yes.
But this is the kind of thing that, we don't see very many of. But on the other hand, somebody really did use it. So it's not like it's,
We
we
actually have the big round barrel butter churn as a
Ah.
backup on a farm near Minot.
uh-huh.
And we had Jersey cows, so we made our own butter.
Okay, okay.
And that was a butter cow.
Yeah.
We worked the butter with.
Well, people do, when we find these, they're hard to find, but we do find these. And, but they're primitive pieces. But something like this, we sell easily for about $25 as an old paddle. This is great. This is great. But this would date. I would be willing to bet you that this dates all the way back to when your family first settled. I would think.
Could be they homesteaded on the farm I was born on. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This would have been one of those original items. And you also brought these cutters, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And these were all actually too. These are older than normal. This is a cutter for a special kind of meat pie.
It was cookie cutter.
Right.
You just run it down and it makes a whole roll of cooked round cookies.
Right. But the fact that there's a curve in it.
The curve is what makes actually when you run it.
You put
that's
two
what makes
together.
the perfect circle.
Yes, and you put two together and you put some stuffing in it.
Oh, you could, sure.
Yeah. So you made little meat pies. Typically they call this a pie cutter.
Oh, okay. We
For
use
that
it
reason.
microfilm.
I know. Well, I mean, people used everything for whatever it worked for. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah. And the same is true of these. You can always tell an old cutter because the metal is all discolored and usually it's been fixed because there's somebody put some, the handles would come off and they would get.
Supposedly it was my great uncle that was a jeweler that made some of the cookie cutters.
Yeah. These are. If you want to have a look at these things, these are about as old as it gets when it comes to cookie cutters. And this spinning wheel also. This is, if I had this in the shop, for example, this would be, we'd be looking at $500 to $600 on it, and even more depending upon it. Like North Dakota pricing. If you took this to New York City, that would be a different story. Of course, we're kind of living in different worlds. Okay, so let's look at some of these other items that we've got here, and let's go with the silver here. This was, yep, okay. Do you have anything, do you know anything about this in terms of?
Yeah, it's a set, that's the
Okay,
cream.
okay.
Everything is a sugar and then a teapot. From my great-grandparents, they lived in southern Minnesota.
Yeah. Yeah, this is silver plate, and this would have been the tea set, including this piece, beautiful, but it's plate, it's silver plate, and it would have been purchased during a time when they were doing lots better, and they had some extra to buy a tea set like this. Not everybody could do that, and so it was a fancy thing to have. Do you know approximately when your grandparents might have? I would, looking at the design and the manufacturer and the information on the bottom here, I'd say it was probably late 20s. Does that sound about right?
Or earlier.
Maybe you're okay, early 20s, somewhere in there, yeah. And then this was not yours. No, that's yours. Now this one is also a piece of silver plate, and it's a gravy boat. But it is the kind of thing too that when people had enough money to buy a gravy boat, they bought a gravy boat. But generally, it was a fancy thing to have. You didn't always need to have a gravy boat. What else do we have here that's? Ah, yes. Where did she go? There you are, Lee. Tell us about your.
Oh, this isn't my family heirloom. This has been on display in the Campbell house for probably 50 years.
Uh-huh.
And I remember we were talking about China and the older generation's view about fine china versus the younger generation's.
Uh-huh.
That it's, well, the problem is because it's not dishwasher safe,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah. There was this was one thing that dishes. Boy, I'll tell you, this is one thing that women really. I shouldn't just say women, but families wanted to have a set of when they finally got to the point where they had some extra and they could afford to buy a nice set. Now this one is an English Indian tree is the pattern, and it's made by Burgess and Lee, and that was a well-known English china maker. And this would have had many pieces. It would have probably set for 6, 8, something like that. And you probably would have had a teapot at one point and a coffee pot.
Not a coffee pot, but there's platters, serving bowls, there's a tureen.
Is there plates, dinner plates?
Yes, dinner plates too.
Yeah, okay. So it was a wonderful dinnerware set, in other words. Now, dinnerware sets, they were expensive to buy, and most people did not buy one from England, that came from England. They bought one that came from a American manufacturer, and if they were lucky, they would get a set as early as the 20s, but not very many people did. Most of the families, it seemed like their china sets came later after the Second World War. It seems like that's when most people got their china sets. Now, I hate to tell you this, but young people don't like these things. They don't like china. They don't like using it. They don't like it doesn't go in the microwave. I mean, there's a number of reasons why younger people have kind of turned their noses up at china. And so it used to be, even as late as the 60s, that when somebody got married, they'd pick a pattern, and they'd get a whole series of whatever it was that they'd selected. They'd select a pattern, and they'd get all of this. And some of these things have turned into heirlooms of some degree, but the problem with it is that the bottom has absolutely fallen out of the china market when it comes to cups and saucers and dinnerware generally. Nobody under the age of 30 wants dinnerware like that. It just isn't something that people hold in high regard, and for all those reasons, you can't microwave it, and you can't put it in the dishwasher. You have to hand wash it, and on and on. Besides that, there's been a dramatic shift in the United States, and this is all over, not just in North Dakota, but the way people eat and people, how they serve their food. We very rarely, most families anyway, very rarely sit down to a formal setting, a formal table setting with the places, with all the china and everything on the table, and then you pass the food around. I mean, very few people do that anymore. And the younger people, they would rather go to Bed Bath & Beyond and buy a $99 set of dinnerware that they can put in the microwave and that doesn't break easily. And when they get tired of what they look like, they'll buy another set. So 4 years later, 3 years later, they get another set. So this is kind of the way things are now. And the younger generation has absolutely zero interest in inheriting these kinds of sets.
I have so many of them.
Yeah.
I got the china cabinets too, so they're in the china.
Yeah, and and of course a lot of people collected things. Now, cups and saucers were a major collectible for many years, and people had huge collections of cups and saucers. And now, because we don't set formal tables anymore, the dynamic has just totally changed on how America eats. I mean, we basically scoop it out of pots on the stove and go sit down, find a chair anywhere in the family room, watch TV. I mean, the formal dinner where everybody has to mind their P's and Q's and sit and you know, not spill anything on the white tablecloth. I mean, that time is over. Yes, exactly. And so consequently, you know, one of the things I do in my work is I see a lot of people all the time who come in with things that they'd like to sell to me. And one of the things, probably the biggest thing, is dishes. People say they've got dishes. They've got their grandmother's set, their mother's set. And, you know, what to do with these, because they don't need them, they never use them, their kids don't want them, and so what do? And unfortunately, there isn't a really good answer for that. The problem comes in that there just isn't, the market has disappeared for dishes.
Following up on that, has the market pretty well disappeared for older furniture? We have a house in 1980, and we bought Mission Oak Hutch, and the table in the living room was given to my grandma, 1908, full solid oak, of course, with 3 leaves, 6 nice chairs. And I looked, and a low boy that's wonderful, oak, and then a maple taller one. Mahogany, I guess it is. And I looked online, just curious, and the bottom has dropped out on those prices.
Yeah, well, that's true, and right now we're in a stage, but you know, these things do change. But right now we're in there's a fascination with mid-century modern design, and everybody wants mid-century. Now, when I say mid-century, for most people that means early 60s to early 70s, approximately, give or take. And this is it's the atomic age stuff. And, you know, that's become very popular. And some of those things, the prices are just astronomically high on lamps, for example, with outrageous shades that have a mid-century design to them. And, I mean, crazy prices on them. But then, you know, this is the way this whole business with stuff, how it works. I mean, it goes up and then it comes down again. So anyway, you know, I'm often asked the question. People say, "Well, what is the book value of my stuff, of my dishes or whatever?" And I have to tell them, there is no such thing as book value. There's absolutely no such thing. It's a different world. We're a internet-based type of market where, you know, it's still geographically driven for most things, like furniture, obviously, but it's still a very different market. Of course, we still have varying levels of value on these things, even though you can't sell it and nobody wants it. If you had to replace it, you'd still have to pay some money to get it. So your insurance values, if you ever do insurance valuation for your contents of your house, it's still pretty high for some of these things, because the fact is the insurance value of something includes not just the cost of buying it, but also the cost of finding it, shipping it. So insurance values are always higher. We mostly deal with retail pricing, because I'm a retail store, and I can tell you what I can sell something for in a heartbeat, but it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with an insurance value, which is much higher. And that's oftentimes what people they'll get confused, and they'll come in and they'll say, I've got these things I was told they're worth $400, and it's, yeah, right, the insurance value is maybe $400, but, you know, realistically, it's, you know, you're not going to get that if you're trying to sell it. Cash value is pretty much, you know, determined by, you know, what you can get in an estate sale or a garage sale, or you know, putting an ad on Marketplace, which these days, I don't know how many people use who am I trying to think of? What? eBay. Not eBay, not Facebook. But Marketplace is the place where you can list on your own as an individual that you've got a piece of furniture that you'd like to sell for X number of dollars. And it's because it's locally based, you're going to get local people saying, oh, I might need a dresser. So they'll, you know, call you out, or whatever your arrangements are. Of course, there's always going to be a donation value. If you decide that your dishes are just not, you're not going to ever get rid of them, you can always donate them, and you can always take that off your income taxes as well. But you know, the thing that's different, what we're here to talk about, hello? Oh, okay. What we're talking about here is the sentimental value, and that's really what's driving most of these things here. For example, postcards. Whose book? Oh, that's yours too. Okay. I looked through this. This is really cool. What this is a book of probably 20s, 30s era postcards.
I think 1909 was probably.
Some of them, yep, looks like they're old, and some of them are what's called photo postcards, which means that they've got a picture of just a regular picture, and this one's dated 1918 of a biplane. You know, there's pictures there's cards in here that there are $20 postcards. They're $20 postcards. But then there's also cards in here that are $1 postcards. So there's just a variety. It's just really wonderful to look at them, though, because do you know the people who sent these, or are they?
Some of them, well, no, of them.
Yeah, you know.
They're all from relatives. A lot of them are from Wisconsin. My grandparents were from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were from Wisconsin relatives that I really didn't know.
Well, you know, the nice thing about postcards is that books like this are hard to come by, and I would say 95% of the books like this you find, people disassemble, and they'll take the cards out, and they'll simply do whatever with the cards. And, you know, frankly, that might be its best use, just because it's really difficult for most people to find any sentimental value. And if you do, that's a good thing. You can, you know, and we'll talk a little bit about what you can do with things that you identify in your home that actually have that sentimental value. Let's see. Well, let's just, as long as we're close to here, let's just talk about this. This is kind of a odd piece in the sense that it's the only original painting we have here today. Now,
There's a note from it about what you were.
right, I read this. It's from the 1880s, from Flandreau, South Dakota, painting by Edward Gray, oil painting, and he was related to your family,
He was a partner of my grandfather's in a hardware store.
right? Okay. Huh. So here you got it. Now this person who actually did the painting
Yes,
was not a world famous artist.
no,
No, they were a hobbyist. And so what we call this is what's called a naive oil painting. Naive being simply a word to describe somebody who wasn't in the business of doing oil painting and didn't make their living, painting oils. But they're wonderful. I find these regularly, naive oil paintings, and they're really very, very nice. I mean, I just love these. Just love them. You're lucky to have it. If I had this in the shop, these the originals sell not for a whole lot, but they start at about $200 and, $200 to $400. Of course, when it's your own relatives, you wouldn't put that you wouldn't consider doing that. Although, if you ever did, at least you'd know what it was. Now,
and I did write out a note explaining a little bit more about where it's going.
right. Yeah, I think I kind of got the gist of it here. Yeah. Painting shows M.I. Eckhearn carrying his fishing poles along a small creek. Yep.
Would that be
Wonderful.
Sell in the right next, in the area where it was painted, in the town, close by, Red Forks, let's say?
If it were taken to that, there probably would be a little, like if there was a painting that we found that was done of the Red River, which we have found, a naive painting of the Red River, and it's around Grand Forks. It does go for more just because there's local interest in things that would show certain things.
The postcards that they were from this area?
It wouldn't make any difference. Yeah, postcards are postcards, and most people aren't, Yes, and to some degree, if they're picture postcards and they're historical from an area, then yes, you could make a case for that. Because if we had postcards from Grand Forks that showed work, let's say, being done on a building that was built in 1910, or something to that effect, then yes, there would be some historical value to that. And like I said, most of those kinds of postcards, you generally start at about 20 on those and go on up. Okay, let's see, what do we miss here? Oh yes, some planes. The planes. Tell us about these planes.
Those three pieces and the coffee mill are from my wife's grandfather's place in southern Germany.
So he brought them from Germany.
Well, they were in her father's house, and when we broke up the house over there, we brought them back to this country.
Oh, okay, so that's been fairly recent then. Okay, so you went to Germany and got this. Okay, so these are German antiques. Hmm. Yeah, I do. Yeah, these, we find this kind of hand tool all the time that was used, and it was something that was used here locally or at least in the United States. But as far as a German one, I don't think there's any added value to the fact that it's from Germany, versus made in the United States. In fact, if anything, maybe even just a little bit less value than if it had a name of a maker with, Cincinnati, Ohio on it or something, showing that it was made in the United States. It might be just a little bit lower in value. But there's still the same type of thing that we would have had here as well. They're the same type. We see these tools all the time. Hand tools are pretty common. They didn't wear out as much as, sometimes the blades are broken, but it doesn't matter so much that the blades are broken because nobody actually uses them to work wood. They generally just put them up on a shelf and use them as a show piece. So here you've got your and this came from Germany. Okay. Okay, yeah. Did they tell you anything about this, or do you know anything about it? Yeah, it was used. Yeah, it's probably, if I had to pick a date out of the air, I'd say it's probably late 20s, approximately, or give or take a few years. And these kinds of things are, people do buy them, but there's not a lot of money in them. If they're probably, they start at about $30 and go up, depending upon details of it. Now, if it's somebody that you knew, it has more value to you personally than it does just to a person who wants to grind up some coffee or whatever else you can put in there. I guess it doesn't have to be, it could be spices or all right. Well, I have been curious about these. Who's the lady who brought, okay, you did. Tell me about these. These are little metal boots, and they look like they're from Holland.
Oh, yeah, I know nothing. They've always been in my mother's dining room for as long as I can remember, and I'm 72 now.
Uh-huh.
And we never thought to ask anybody where they came from, but I've never seen anything quite like them.
And they were in your family, though. They came from, I don't know how they ended up in my family, but they've been there for a long, long time. Yeah. Well, this kind of points to one of the things about heirlooms that a good time to talk about that right now is that if you do have something like this, that at one point the person who's the closest to the item really knew pretty much what it was and who did what with it. It's really a good idea to write all that down. Because what ends up happening with family items that are older, nobody really thinks to do that, and then before you know it, all the people that know anything at all about it are gone. And the only thing I can tell you about this is that it's not unusual for these little doodads, little boots, to have been made somewhere in. I can't. They're not marked.
Yeah, they're not marked.
Yeah, and they're not the kind of thing that. Right. Possibly. Yeah. Yeah, so whatever, somebody picked them up in whatever country they were from, Holland perhaps, or,
And my family's pretty much all Norwegian.
Well, you never know, maybe, you never know. So I guess the thing is that the bottom line is this: if you do know something about something that you've got and you haven't done it yet, go home and do it. Write down what you know. Where did you get this? Who gave it to you? What did they tell you it was? Approximately what time period might it have been used? And that will be important, because 20 years from now, who knows whether anybody will remember all that. You know, it's just, so writing it down is a really critical thing. Okay.
You've never seen anything
Like this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have, but they've always been kind of, yeah, souvenir shop items.
Okay.
You know, I have. But they're just, they're kind of, they're cute, but that's
Yeah.
about as far as it goes.
Oh, yeah, I didn't figure it had any value. They're just
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you can write down whatever you know. Now here's an item. Tell me, when did you get it and who gave it to you?
It wasn't that long ago, but my daughter in Minneapolis found this in an antique store in Minneapolis
Okay.
and took it up to the counter to buy it. And in the process of purchasing it, she said, "Boy, this is a really unique bank." And they said, "It's a bank?" So it was like, well, hey, I've already bought it.
Okay. But this is a very common object, this type of thing. We see these all the time. And unfortunately, I have to tell you, this is a reproduction.
Okay.
This was made just in the last 10 years or so.
Okay.
But let's say a word about this, what this is trying to be a reproduction of. Around I suppose 85 would be about the first of them were made, the cast iron banks. And a lot of these, there was a real, people didn't have places banks were not available, so they just throw their money in a bank and that they had at home. Now, where was I going? Oh, this has got a coin in it too. Did you know that? I was going to say that. Some of these were what's called a still bank, and it doesn't have moving parts. And others were this kind of thing where it was actually, there was moving parts, and sometimes the coin was put somewhere and it, somebody grabbed it and stuck it. I mean, some of them are pretty elaborate. And coin banks they've just been really popular over the years, and they continue to hold their value. Right now, for some reason, the old coin banks of all kinds have kind of gone through a resurgence of interest. And we're finding that, like, if that was the real deal, if it was not a repro, that bank would be somewhere between, it would probably $400 and $600 for the bank. And I mean, they're very high. The movable ones, of course, are better. The ones that are just the still bank are still good and also sell for good money, but they don't sell for as much as the movable ones. There's some really clever banks that you see. I mean, they're just, holy cow. There's all sorts of, lions and tigers and bears and all sorts of motifs. And the collecting field, for some reason, we go through highs and lows on certain things, but banks, for some reason, are really at a high level of interest right now. And you can easily sell an original cast iron bank without any problem at all on whatever place you want to try selling it. I mean, it's but in this case, since it isn't I feel better that it's not an old family piece. But I have had to tell people that. I've had to tell people, well, I'm sorry to say, but somebody in 1932 bought a fake. And it may be old, but it's not real. But thank you for bringing it in. Now, okay.
My parents built their house in 1950 on Chestnut Street, and kitty corner from their house was a couple that didn't have any children, but she graduated she came on over to our house, a housewarming gift in 1950, and gave that to my mother.
Did her last name start with a T?
No, Johnston.
Oh, okay. Because this one has got initials on it on the bottom, MBT. It also has a stamp for the UND pottery, the Circular University of North Dakota Grand Forks pottery. So this is a very well-known mark in these parts.
It's not a mark of cable, we knew that.
No.
But
Well, it doesn't make any difference. Well, because if this were just a simple pot, one color, purple, blue, whatever, and it had the mark on it and it said MBT on the bottom, yeah. But this is a special pot. This is very special. This has got a design etched into it. Whoever did this, whoever has the initial MBT, and it might have been, let's see, the instructors there wasn't anybody MBT that was, whoever did this was a very good craftsman. They did an excellent job at forming these flowers on the side. This is an excellent example of a piece of UND pottery. You know, it's just really wonderful. I would be delighted if I found this at a garage sale. Which, never know. keeps us going, right? So it would be interesting if you ever did find out who MBT is. If you know of anybody. But it wouldn't make that much difference. Yes.
There is the list of known.
Yes, there is. That's true. That's something that you can check, is the people who were students, the students. And there might be an MBT in there that you can identify. But it's going to be 6 of one, half dozen of the other anyway, because most of the people who were students and made these, they didn't go on to achieve fame as potters. They simply made a pot at UND and put their initials on it, and that's it. It was a one of, and I'm sure that's the kind. But I wouldn't be surprised to know that she maybe went on to major in art and do other things. You never know, because it's very, very good. No, if I had this in my shop, this would have a price tag of between $600 and $800 on it. Yeah, because of the design and the size. This is quite large for a pot. So, shall I drop it? No, I won't drop it. I won't drop it. Yeah, we see a lot of UND around here, of course, because it was all made here, and so every once in a while we'll come up with wonderful examples. Yes.
Don Miller, formerly of the department, he wrote 2 books on Acacia pottery.
Yes.
Available somewhere.
Yes, they are. We usually refer to, we've got all those resources. Yeah, Don was it's kind of fun. That's one of the reasons it's fun to go to garage sales in Grand Forks, because you have the chances you see one of these somewhere. Okay, ooh, so I can knock this over. Radio. Yes, tell us about your radio.
Well, I don't know very much. It was a gift to me by 2 members of the radio club in Grand Forks, Rod Klug and Jerry Moran. So it's from the 40s, late 40s, something like that?
47.
Yeah, it works great.
Yeah.
Did Jack Benny on?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned mid-century design earlier. This has the advantage of having this wonderful look, and it's a really great piece. And even if it didn't work, it would be great to sit on a shelf along with your mid-century lamps. And unfortunately, somebody put their hot coffee on top here. Oh well, can't have everything. Yeah, these radios, 40s radios, of course, in the 40s, this was the heyday of radio listening. And that's where everybody listened to radios, and you didn't have anything else to listen to besides radios. And so radios were everywhere in people's houses, and this is, this is very typical of, it's kind of an off-brand. It's not, usually you see Philco's and several other brands. This is an unusual brand. But if we did some research with that, we could probably find out more about where it was made. But nevertheless, just because of the design of the thing, it's a wonderful item, and it would probably easily be somewhere in the $70 to $80 range for price. And now we got this. Whose is this? Oh, it's yours too, yes. Good.
My wife and I were debating. We believe it's a Norwegian sled. It's either Norwegian or Alaskan, we don't know. And it was given to us years ago, and it's been hanging up in my house and garage.
Okay. And the person who gave it to you just didn't tell you much about it at all?
No.
Okay. Well, this is a nice little sled. It's got some age on it too. If you notice here, it's got the metal runners. This actually would work really well. I think you could really move. You could really move in this. Anything like this that has a little bit, it has a little bit of damage on it. It's not quite, what you'd hope for. Now, sleds of this kind are interesting, and the most heavily used place for these is Minnesota, hanging on the wall of a cabin somewhere above the fireplace. And that's what's going to happen if it were ever to go on the market. Somebody would buy the sled because they'd want to hang it up on the wall as decor. Nevertheless, it still works, I'm sure. I'm sure it would just work just super. In fact, it's really sturdy. And, and as far as knowing exactly where it was made, I honestly don't know, and I don't think it makes much difference for the pricing of it. Unless you would know in your family where they might have lived. Did you have any?
Well, they lived in by Brainerd, Minnesota.
Okay, so it was.
Yeah.
Okay, so probably some Minnesota maker. Yeah. Well, this kind of thing, they're not unusual. We see sleds regularly. And this type of a thing has got a lot of appeal. It's not too big. It's not as big as a toboggan, for example. And it can be used in a number of ways. People set them by their fireplace and put a wood box on them. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with a sled like this, besides using it, of course. But if I had to put a value on it, I would say that it's somewhere around $100, give or take, probably a little bit more. If I'd be putting it a price tag on it, I'd say, well, it's about 125, 130, or something like that. And that's, I think cheap. I think that would be a good price, a good sales price for it. All right. Who's Pogo Stick? That's you. Oh, he has got the most interesting things. So tell me about this pogo stick.
That's a pogo stick.
Yes, it is. I'd get up and jump on it if I.
It works.
Yeah.
We need an 8-year-old to do it.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, yeah. Well, this isn't as old as you might. Where did you get it? Did you?
So I bought it in a shop in Bisbee, Arizona, and they had a sign in the shop: "You break it, you bought it." And so I was getting it down, and I don't remember now what I broke. But anyway, I had to pay a little bit. No, it's not. I would say it's what, from the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, I was going to say but it's pogo sticks. These are great. No, it's $35. $35.
When I carried it in, the price tag was on it from when you bought
What was it?
Oh, what did it say? Am I good or what?
Really good. She's not the type, so there's no illusion going.
Oh man, oh man, oh man. Oh man,
Yeah,
okay.
that doesn't exactly what I wrote.
All right, Betty, your turn.
Okay, I told her when I came in when I was a kid, that was in a hall closet, and I thought it was one of the ugliest things in the house. And then, just before she died, we were going through my mother's things, and she told me the story.
So tell us.
She would have been about 10 years old, so this would probably have been about 1918. And she never said Ma, but that time she told the story, she used Ma and Pa. She said, Ma was working on this stocking. They were all sitting in the living room, and Pa was watching her. He left the room and came back an hour later, about an hour later, she said, and he had that wooden shoe carved. You know, when I think of him carving it, I've always said, you know, he must have had some sort of tool, but it couldn't have been electric because they didn't have electricity on the farm.
Right.
So, I don't know how he made it or even what it's made of, but
Well,
now I love it.
Well, it's interesting because it's so narrow. I mean, and I would think that this was supposed to be stretchy. Is the slipper was supposed to be stretchy so you could, but yeah, shoe forms like this are not unusual. They were used, and they were made as your grandfather made it out of wood with a knife, and people use them to shape. Here, we'll take this off here.
I worry about the fiber because both of my grandmothers did a lot of things on fibers that haven't lasted.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's not, it's right. No, I think, now this is wonderful. I think this is the kind of thing that you could put, if you had a memory box or a case on your wall and you said, okay, just set it up there as a decorative item. I think it's just beautiful. I mean, it's just the kind of thing that, you know, speaks to a different generation. I mean, talk about the style and everything. I mean, it's got the heel, and it's. I think it's a wonderful thing. This does qualify as a primitive, and as such, the value is higher. Now, I know you'd never sell it, Betty, but I mean, you know, if I had this in the shop, something like this would be, you know, you'd be looking at $100 bill on it, at least. You know, it's a wonderful old piece. Wonderful. All right. Let's see. Yes. Tell us about this.
I inherited that from my mother when she passed. She has a whole collection. Well, now I have a whole collection. I think it's Moriage.
Moriage? That's exactly right.
And I think, well, I've got another bottle at home, so I think those were barber bottles.
Did you have family members that were active in the Second World War or the Korean War by any chance? Did anybody go over to Korea or?
Some families, yeah.
They did? Okay. Because this is a very good example of the kind of thing that would have been purchased by one of our service members that would have gone over to Korea. Usually most of these came in during that era rather than the Second World War. But our service people were stationed in different places, and they always wanted to bring back for their families, for their mothers or whatever, something from that part of the world. And so that's exactly what this is. This is a wonderful piece made probably for export, although it's hard to tell. I mean, there were a lot of makers of this kind of thing in Korea and elsewhere that they were selling to GIs and other soldiers. And so whoever it was thought that they would just bring this over and give it to their mother. Just kind of sweet. If you'd know, who it might have been, you might make that note and stuff it in there and just leave that so that somebody will be able to actually, now that I just did this, I've done that. I've had some item that from somewhere, and I've done this, and out falls a note, and it says, Uncle Harry brought this from Korea in 1950 whatever, and so people have been putting notes in their antique ware for a long time. But that said, this particular decorating motif is not, and never really was, very popular in the United States. I think probably from the get-go, the Moriage technique was associated with Japan, and there was no love lost there. And so it wasn't like people said, oh, gee, but even though it's beautiful, it's beautiful. It's just that there wasn't a whole lot of it that people saved. So it's kind of unusual to see a piece in this, because this is in excellent condition. And there are people that buy it. Now, we're in North Dakota, and if I moved my shop magically to San Francisco, I'd be able to sell this in a heartbeat, because it's a nice old piece of Moriage. But here, not so much. So I'm looking at, giving you a figure of, probably from $25 to $30, usually, somewhere in that neighborhood. Okay, baseball. Baseball, tell us.
Well, with the Grand Forks Chiefs in the 1950s, Brooks Bolcall was president of the Northern League, and he used to go around and sell season tickets along with Jack French, who was the announcer for the Grand Forks Chiefs games. And anyway, Dad usually bought season tickets, and he casually mentioned to Brooks, because he knew they did business together, and that I was a baseball fan and whatever, and Brooks said, well, I'll see if I can get a autographed baseball from the team. And eventually, he did, and I got the ball. But, being, 7 years old at the time, we played a lot of catch with the ball. Threw grounders, whatever, and it turned completely crazy. And so a couple of years ago, I was down at the Moorhead Antique Mall, and I saw that, and I remember Dad getting a ball, like I said, 1958, and I remember Don Clendenin, who, was a major leaguer and was a Pittsburgh Pirate. Yes, and but he was the World Series most valuable player of the 1969 Mets team. Well, anyway, big long story short, I saw that ball at the Moorhead Antique Mall, and I bought it, and I put it in that, donated it to the minor, and I paid $95 for it. I'm doing your job for it.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Well, this is one of those things that, are you going to put it back where you had it, or are you going to?
No, it's going to stay here in Byron.
It is. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, it would be nice to have a little card right here to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, there is. Duh. 58 Grand Forks Chief. Okay. All right. Very good. Excellent. Well, I think this is the kind of thing that in the one area that has really expanded in recent years for us has been sporting collectibles. I'll tell you, sporting collectibles are just through the roof. And so, anything like that from that era, from that date, gee, I don't, $200 or $300? It's, you know, entirely possible, entirely possible. But you wouldn't sell it anyway.
You say Don Clinton is on that model?
Yeah, yeah.
Any other big leaguers?
Yeah, two of them.
Who's the other one?
I can't remember. I looked it up.
Gene Allen?
What was the-
Second baseman?
No, they only played 1 or 2 years, one was the Cubs and one was,
Waltham,
Hmm?
Waltham. Who's Waltham? This, yep, yours. Okay, when did you get this?
I got this not long after my great uncle died at my aunt's house. She had his trunk, and he was a farmer near Pelican Rapids, born in early 80s, I would say 1880s. So I'd say this is probably the first decade of the 1900s that he bought this as a young guy, as a farmer. Yeah.
Okay, well, he did put a new, this is
That's
new.
mine.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say, this is brand new. The watch itself is a Waltham pocket watch and is, you know, these are super common,
Oh, very.
very common. And when you take it home, you can try to twist off that top and see if you can. I'm not gonna push it now, but you should be able to get that off. But these pocket watches, this is your garden variety pocket watch. And I mean, it's the kind of thing that if it works, assuming if it works, that, you know, something like this would be somewhere between 100 and 125. And
I looked up a little information before coming. Waltham started in Waltham, Illinois in 1850.
Yeah.
They went bankrupt in 1957.
Mhm.
They have produced 40 million watches.
yeah, it's one of the more prolific makers. And they made a wonderful product, but you know, yeah.
They made some expensive ones too. I looked online and there were some up with gold, you know, for 18 karat gold and a few.
Yeah, yeah.
Some precious, I
Brought
think it was
this.
diamonds with some precious stones embedded in them.
This is
That was my mother's first
wonderful.
in the 1930s.
A 1930s bathing suit. I mean, who would have thought? Who would have thought? Isn't it? It is. It's made out of wool. Yeah, absolutely it's made out of wool. Oh, I'll tell you. This is, I'm so glad you saved this. But whatever you do, put a note on it. Put a note on it and say what it is so that nobody throws it away. Or better yet, if you know, I mean, it's the kind of thing that is so hard to find. Most of these things, you must have had it in a moth-proof. Yeah, okay, because most of these things, the wool bathing suits were, I mean, that was a thing back in that day. But they all got eaten up. You know, they all got eaten up. And so to see one in this condition, in fact, I can't even believe it, that it's as good as it is. It's almost as good as the day it was worn. Oh man. Oh, be still my heart. Yeah, this is terrific. This is the kind of thing that, you know, it's because the condition is so important for many things, including glassware and cloth items. Some things it doesn't make as much difference, the condition, but the condition is everything on a wool bathing suit. And this is, I would give it a A+ rating on that. Now, this kind of clothing, if you were to want to buy an equivalent one, you would be paying somebody somewhere between $500 and $800 for it. I mean, that would be your replacement value on it because they're so rare and they're so in demand. Like if I would guarantee you that if you put it on eBay or some other sales site, that it would get snapped up at whatever number you would put next to it, practically, because it's just so super rare. And I mean, I just think, and even the buttons are still there. Oh my God, she must have really hated swimming. Yes. Yes, well, that's that whole mid-century type, 30s sort of look. Oh man. Well, you've got a real gem here. You've got a real gem. On something like this, one time I had a long story short, I ended up with a pair of jeans, and they still had their labels on them, and they were Headies. Headline. Okay. My husband here, thank you, my memory. And I decided that I would never in a million years be able to find anybody in Grand Forks that probably either knew what they were or cared about them. So I would just simply sell them at auction. And I did. And they ended up in a jean museum in Seattle. And what did I get for them? Yeah, something like that, because they were Headies with the back label that was the paper label was still there. They'd never been worn. They were mint. There were 2 pair, and that's kind of the way I feel about something like this. I mean, it's just wonderful, and you're never going to ever see it. You're never ever going to see another one. It's just terrific. So take good care of it. Take good care of it. Now, finally, last but not least, is my husband's contribution to this evening. Would you like to tell us what this is, Eric?
My father was in World War II in the South Pacific on the island of Espiritu Santo, which was called the New Hebrides at the time. It's now Vanuatu. He was a surgeon in the Navy, and I know because of pictures and other things that he would have treated local residents. And I suspect, although I don't know, that he was given that, and it's what you call it, a figurehead from a canoe, outrigger, dugout canoe. And it was one of the things he brought back from the South Pacific. And beyond that, I know very little.
These kinds of artifacts have been heavily reproduced, and they're still being produced actually to this day. But this one is the real deal, and of course that means it has a bit more value than one of the others. What the official name of these is? What was it, Eric?
Figurehead is what goes on the bow of the canoe.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Europeans would have naked ladies. If
Yeah.
you're in the South Pacific or Polynesian, you might have something.
Yeah. So a Polynesian canoe top. I suppose maybe you grab them here and pull the canoe up on shore, maybe. Well, anyway, we determined that this piece, that if it were going on the market, it'd be somewhere between $200 and $300 for something like this, because they were actually pretty common. And then we've got Hanson ducks, right?
Ell said that, bring some things. I've accumulated a collection of a couple of dozen of these made by Thomas Hanson in Valley City. Thomas Hanson was a semi-invalid individual in the 40s and 50s, and he carved all the native game birds of North Dakota, as well as a bunch of other kinds of birds, owls and pelicans and things. And if you were traveling through Valley City in the 50s, you might stop and see them in a restaurant for sale or sold for a couple bucks for a pair. They're usually sold in pairs, a male and female. In my collection, these are special. This is the heirloom members of my collections because my father bought these in the probably in the early 50s. Now I have a bunch of other ones with them.
A bunch.
But anyway, that's what they are. It's a kind of a unique North Dakota folk art piece. You'll see them every now and then. A pair of those canvas backs, if they were in better condition than those, would sell for $150, maybe even $200. He did a lot of pheasants, and those sell for about $100 a pair. But so it all varies with the rarity.
All right, and then this is,
You can do that.
all right, this is Eric's family's lamp, his grandmother's, I believe. And I've always liked it because it was old, and even when we've been married for over 50 years, but when we first met, I just thought it was so cool, and we ended up with it. And Eric reminded me that we had been, it does have a chimney, but we elected not to bring that since it's so fragile. We ended up in an antique mall in Iowa somewhere, and we found one that was identical to this one. And I hounded my husband to buy it. I said, buy it. It would be much better as a pair, you know, to get two rather than just the one. Well, he didn't think that was such a great idea. So he didn't. And I was sorry. I've been sorry for ever since. Because it would have been so nice to have a pair of these with a, you know, identical sitting up on the mantle or whatever. But a word about these kinds of lamps. Oil lamps are just everywhere. You see them, there's a lot of them around. And this one is particularly nice because it has this porcelain base with the painted flowers. Most of them aren't as elaborate as this one is. But oil lamps generally are very, very common. And the plain ones, in fact, you can buy a plain one at Menards if you still want to get a brand new one. But this one is old, but it's still, like, if I had, let's say, the chimney on it, and if I had it in the shop, it would be somewhere around $65 or something like that. Oil lamps are very common. So, you know, we are just about out of steam here, and I think I'm probably out of time too. And I do encourage all of you, when you go home, look around your home and do think about a little bit about documentation and how you can describe some of these things and you know, who owned it, how did you get it, you know, a little bit, so that we can actually save some of this information for posterity. And there are some things that it's not worth fooling with, and that is a category that I particularly dislike, I guess. It's the made-to-be collectibles item. The made-to-be collectible items are things like, most of them are branded things like, you know, I hate to say Hallmark, but, you know, ornaments, or they're things you buy in stores, and they urge you to keep buying them, and they number them so that you'll buy 1, 2, 3, and then you'll buy whatever, so you've got the whole set. And the whole idea being that somehow that would be very, very beneficial financially if you did that. Well, the only problem is that it's not true. None of it's true. One time I had a little old lady, she really was a little old lady, she was smaller than me, and she came into the shop with a big box, bigger than what looked like she could carry, and put it on the counter, and I opened it. She said, "Would you look at these?" And I said, "Okay." She said, "I'd like to," she said it this way, she said, "I'd like to get my money now." And I looked at it, and these were Knowles plates. That they're the kind of plate that they sold everywhere, and they were absolutely worthless. I mean, just worthless. But usually the back page of Parade magazine had a, send, get yours now kind of ads. And that's true. There's a lot of merchandise that's marketed that way. It's like, okay, it's numbered. It's collected now because it'll be out of print or it'll be gone and you won't be able to get it. Well, don't fall for any of that because it's not only is it not true, but it never works out that way. I don't think I've ever seen, we turn away more things that are in numbered sequence and look like somebody spent at least 15, 20 bucks on an item, and we literally just don't even, there's no market. There's absolutely no market for them. So, be careful what you buy, but keep collecting what you do love, and if you love it, then it doesn't matter. If you love Hallmark cards or Hallmark ornaments, go ahead and buy them, because that's really what it's like. What it's about is that you buy things that you love and you have those things around and then you hand those down to your family.